Good afternoon and welcome to the living room. We're so glad you joined us. I'm your host for today, Deborah. If you're new here, this program is a sharing of truths that stand for all seasons that our guests have learned from walking with the Lord. Today we have Joel sharing with us about navigating through transitions. Joel has a wealth of knowledge on this topic, which he squeezed into a short 25 minutes. But if you have questions for him, you can type them in at Slido with the code 92918 and we'll try to answer them. Let's invite Joel on screen. Hello, Joel.
Hi.
Hi. Joel was born in Malaysia and moved to Singapore when he was 12 years old. In 2003, he attended the Focus Living Leadership course, which piqued his interest in leadership development, and that inspired him to pursue his passion of coaching and resourcing leaders in their developmental journey and helping them to transition well. Joel spent 12 years in the broadcasting industry. In 2012, he accepted the role of Asia representative at Leader Breakthrough, a leadership development organization. Alongside this, he joined YWAM Singapore in 2014. Joel has been investing his time developing leaders whilst being in the leadership circle of YWAM Singapore. Joel's one of the busiest persons I know, but he always makes time for the one and gives you his full attention when you have anything important to ask. You can be sure that you walk away from a conversation with him with more questions than answers, but definitely in a good way. So get ready to be enriched and challenged. Here's Joel with Navigating Through Transitions.
Hi everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Debs. Good to have you join us at our Facebook Live. And if you're like me, you've probably gone through a number of transitions in your lifetime. Some minor ones and some major ones. And transitions has never been easy for me. Often it kind of stretched out longer than I would actually expect. But going through a transition, I often would wonder, why am I here? Why is it so painful? Am I going through this because of some mistakes that I've made? Or was it a wrong turn that I actually took, or did I not learn the lessons that I went through or I'm supposed to learn? Why is it so uncomfortable? I don't feel like who I usually am. And a series of many other questions that continues to plague me when I'm going through a time of transition. I think there are some lessons that we can learn out of a time of transition, and yet sometimes we kind of know that there are some lessons, but we don't know how to really process those lessons from our transition. So, I would ask us to stay with me as we go through this session, and we try to answer the question, why is transition so important? What is there for us to gain out of this? So I'd like us to kind of imagine driving through a heavy rain. Yesterday, there was a heavy downpour, and when you're driving through a heavy downpour, you kind of start slowing down as you drive and turn up the wiper and increase the speed of the wiper so that you can see clearly. But if the rain is just so heavy, even at the maximum speed, you won't be able to see clearly. So you keep slowing down, hoping that you can actually see clearly. As you keep slowing down and try to look forward, you find that you are just driving through a fog. What do you do? What do you do? And I think transitions is sometimes like that. It's like you're driving through a fog and you're not sure, what do I do? And you can't really see what's ahead of you. And obviously you can't move backwards, right? You can't head back. So let's first start looking at a couple of biblical examples. I think the Bible is full of examples that or that shares with us the transitions of many individuals. And the first up, we look at the life of Abraham. We know this famous passage. The Lord said to Abraham, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I'll bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing." He had to leave everything that he was familiar with, and he had to leave his beloved family. But you know what? Interestingly, Abraham heard God's clear instructions And he chose to obey the word of the Lord and move forward. Isn't that interesting? Based on just the word of the Lord that he heard clearly, he would leave everything behind and move forward. The next up would be Joshua. After the death of Moses, God commissioned Joshua to take on a new assignment. And this assignment is one that is bigger and more challenging than he's ever known to date. He had to lead both himself and he had to lead others. He really had to step out in faith, courage, and believe in a promise that the Lord had for him. The third character we look at in the Bible is Esther. Esther was certainly given an unexpected assignment by God. She did not see it coming. In fact, she wasn't qualified nor prepared, but she knew that she was placed there for such a time as this. She knew that she was placed there for such a time as this. And she took a huge risk of going to the king, though it was against the law. And that action alone that she took would not only impact her, but have consequences that would impact other people as well. So as she took that step of faith, even though it was a risk, she won the favor of the king. And God moved her into a new stage of her journey. And we know what happened after that. The tremendous change and good things that happened out of that single obedience that she took, that step that she took. Another character that we all know very well is Saul. God met Saul as he approached Damascus through a suddenly experience. God clarified his destiny and brought about a complete paradigm shift from a man who was previously breathing threats and murder against the disciples of God. He changed into a man who was proclaiming Jesus in the synagogues. And he had and out of this suddenly experience where, he completely was out of control, he was even blinded. He knew not what to do next, and he had to wait. He had to patiently wait. But he chose to obey the step-by-step instructions of the Lord. And that took time. It wasn't an instantaneous revelation. He was taken through a process. And it definitely wasn't Saul's and Paul's timing. It was God's timing. And we look at these four characters, and we know of many other characters in the Bible. Joseph, David, Moses. They all had moments of transition, and these times of transition were major. They were so significant that it moved them into a new phase. It changed their life forever. And that is something that we can have as a perspective stepping into transition as we walk through a time of transition. There are four lessons that we can draw from these examples. Number one, God often uses transitions to move a follower forward in his or her development as a leader. Number two, God uses transitions to help a leader consolidate their learnings. And he helped a leader clarify their contribution and values and establish signposts towards a leader's contribution. Number three, God uses transitions to help a leader process critical past issues. And often we might not have completely dealt with certain wounds or bring closures to certain situations and relationships. And sometimes transitions are those moments where he brings us back to those and takes us along that path to deal with some of these things. And number four, God uses transitions to provide new insights related to a leader's calling, his role perhaps, new methods, and new ways of contributing moving forward. One phrase that I really love is that you don't gain clarity alone, and often God also brings people alongside at key moments in our transition. And we'll kind of look at that in a short while. One of the things that really helped me as I journey through the different transitions of my life is a transition model. And this transition model is one model that I like to share with all of us. And in his book, Stuck, Dr. Terry Walling, he shares a transition life cycle model. And this cycle is based upon research by Dr. Robert Clinton from Fuller Seminary and from Dr. Terry Walling's own personal leadership journey and life experience. I found this simple and very helpful, and I hope that you can take down some notes during this time as I take you through a brief overview of the transition model. But before that, let's try to define what a transition is. Transition can be defined as the in-between times in an individual development. Transition can be defined as the in-between times in an individual development. It can also be defined as a time where God clarifies past lessons and takes a Christ follower from one phase of development into another phase of development. So a time where God clarifies the past lessons and takes Christ follower from one phase of development into another phase of development. Let's take a look at the next slide, which shows the transition life cycle. And there are 4 phases in the life cycle. There is the entry, there is the evaluation, there is the alignment, and there is the direction. Entry, evaluation, alignment, and direction. I'd like to take us through a brief description of each of the different stages. Now, in the entry stage of transition, it is about letting go. Often, God is calling our pretending into question, challenging our view of God and view of self. Many times we move into an entry stage not even knowing that we've kind of entered into a transition. By the time we realize that we're in a transition, we usually are in the evaluation or alignment stage. And we realize I'm stuck. I've not been able to get out of this situation that I'm in. I think the cool thing is that we can really identify the stages of transition through what we call process items. And these process items occurs at each stage of our journey in the transition cycle. And what is process items? It is simply ways God shapes a leader in their lifetime, right? Process items are different ways that God shapes a leader through their lifetime. So in the entry into the transition cycle, there are sometimes an occurrence of a series of events and known as life crisis. Life crisis can include issues of security, issues of health, finances, issues of hurts, change in the life stage of your life, perhaps getting married or moving into a different season of your journey. It could be because of family trauma. It could be because of material conflicts. It could be loss of employment or relational tension with others. The pressure of life crisis processing is often compounded because the struggles seem to multiply and occur simultaneously. It's this bunch of things that happen all of a sudden, all together, and it makes it so complex and difficult to navigate through a time of transition. The second process in the entry stage is the isolation processing. Now, isolation processing refers to those events or circumstances that causes an individual to feel set aside, somewhat separated from those things that people, once brought, that the people that brought life into your life. Well, it doesn't mean that you have stopped working and functioning as a person. In fact, actually, life continues to go on. But rather, there is a loss of connection with all that's occurring around you, all that's occurring in the life around you. And this isolation produces a deep hunger for God and a deeper desperation that was previously not felt by you. The third process item is negative preparation. It is often difficult to understand negative preparation. It involves struggles with your business partners, close friends, or even ministry associates. negative preparation can break a Christ follower free to move on into the next chapter of his life, his or her development. And often it is those who are closest to you who brings the greatest hurt and struggle. With this, it sends you towards pursuing answers and considerations of moving forward to new directions in your life. So entry is a phase that we go through, and it brings us into the next two stages, and that's the evaluation and the alignment stages. And one thing to note is that most of the transition is actually spent in these two next stages, toggling between evaluation and alignment and back to evaluation and alignment. If you imagine a ship, a large ship, and every ship has actually a water line, that divides the ship that stays up, the part of the ship that stays above the water, and what stays under the water. And from afar, you can't see the markings, but when the ship comes near and when it docks, that's where you see the water line. And interestingly, the water line suggests to the maintenance crew that beneath this line lies the impact and corrosion. This is where the force and resistance occurs, beneath the water line. And this often goes unnoticed. In the evaluation stage, God goes underneath to examine the damage and impact of the most recent voyage that you've been on. And unless it's brought to port, this damage often goes unrecognized. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And in the evaluation and alignment stages, it tends to feel long drawn because life processing takes time. It doesn't happen instantaneously. It feels long drawn also because we are often in a hurry to get out of it. But you know what? God is not in a hurry. God is interested in us. He is doing that needed deeper work in our life. And so in the evaluation, we end up evaluating ourselves. We evaluate the situation that we are in. We evaluate relationships that are around us, relationships with our superiors, our co-workers, and those that might be under us, relationships with family even, relationship with our spouse, relationship with God. And that brings us often to a place of repentance and surrender. You find that there are areas that I've not done right, and so God, would you forgive me? And and you align yourself to Him, His Word. We discover also during a time of evaluation that beliefs are not values. We discover our true conviction, and we're challenged to live them out. Again, in the evaluation and alignment stages, God uses process items to help us in this process. I'd like to share 3 process items with you. God uses different moments to actually test our actual belief and behavior. So obedience check presents a crisis of belief. Obedience check presents a crisis of belief. Are you making decisions based on God's truth as opposed to your own personal feeling? You see, often in our life journey, we end up kind of mixing God's truth and our own personal emotions and justify our decisions based on our emotions. And when it comes to a time of evaluation, God often takes us there and helps us look at this truth and if we are actually living it out. And sometimes at the end of it, it involves giving up of a title, giving up of a prestige, in order to follow God's leading even into another organization. Secondly, God uses transitions to test our heart's consistency. Integrity checks is used to evaluate your inner conviction with your outward behavior. Integrity checks is used to evaluate your inner conviction with your outward behavior. It could be tests in the areas of finance, resource allocation, priorities in life, that which you say it is priority but don't really live it out, how you use your time, sexual temptations, character challenge, relationships, or even consistency with your lifestyle. Integrity checks seek to match your word with your deed. And God uses integrity checks to reveal false beliefs and refine convictions on which the future is going to be built upon. And this is a very much needed time of going deeper in anchoring us in our core values. And thirdly, divine contexts are significant people, voices, relationships, authors, and sometimes even historical characters or contemporary leaders who comes along to deposit critical truth or insight at the right moment. Barnabas was a divine contact for Paul. He sponsored and helped Paul make the transition from what he was to the significant role that he played in the future of the church. And so God uses people at the right time, and sometimes it might just be a once-off engagement. Sometimes it might last through that time of transition or even beyond. I look at my own journey, and certainly divine contexts are quite significant in my own journey, and the Lord would always bring someone along, and I kind of keep a lookout as I go through the transition. I keep a lookout on some of these process items as I go through my time of evaluation and alignment, so that I can gain the most out of it. This back and forth time in evaluation and alignment is really hard. It really is hard. And sometimes no matter what you do, you might still be in it. And you don't get to decide when to get out of a time of transition. And actually God decides when you are done with it. And times of transition is also a time where God reminds us who is in control. Are you in control of your life, or is God in control of your life? In alignment, something is always given up in order to gain something that is better for the future. It's different for every Christ follower, and in some sense there is no formula to the common question, so how do I get out of it? You have no control. God has control. And because you and I, we are each uniquely designed, He has His ways. And He is sovereign, and He's sure. And He has promised us that He will never leave us. And as the transition begins to end, there are a series of destiny experiences that will occur. It could be a single event or a series of events joined together. And it gives you a sense of the way forward. Well, example, Moses' experience of the burning bush in Exodus 3, or Samuel's learning to recognize the voice of God as he spoke to him at night. And you find it in 1 Samuel chapter 1-2. And Paul's dramatic encounter with Christ and his blindness from the light in Acts chapter 9. Well, the biblical character who most embodies destiny experiences, and I'm sure you will agree with me, is Joseph. Joseph's life, man, is filled with so many destiny experiences. And as you experience the different series of destiny experiences, we also experience destiny revelation. And destiny revelation often occurs after a series of preliminary destiny experiences. It is the aha moment. It is when a Christ follower knows that he or she has heard from God. And this could be from months or even years of journey galvanized together into a future direction. The future begins to unfold, although not all the answers are present. A third process item that occurs at this stage is destiny fulfillment. It vindicates the work that God has been authoring all along. It is the moment when Christ followers actually begin to see God's plans unfold before them. And destiny fulfillment causes others even to follow along. And this is a pathway forward that has emerged. No transition is completed without a faith challenge. And that means at the end of your coming out of the transition, there's always a faith challenge. Faith to trust Him and not our own abilities. Faith to step in the unknown of His provision of finances. Faith into the new vision, new job, new ministry opportunity. New leadership challenges or new or a family confrontation and emotional needs that will need to be confronted. But every transition ends off with that faith challenge. So this is a simple overview of the transition life cycle. And I like it because it's simple to recall and yet much depth to each stage. And often what sometimes I would do is draw the transition cycle out on a piece of paper as I'm sharing it with a friend or colleague when I sense that they're in a place of transition. And I'm sure you can do that, by drawing a circle, and you have entry, evaluation, alignment, and direction. But there are some warnings that I like to share with us. Transitions can lead to a plateau or an arrested development. As you go through a time of transition, there's going to be times of discouragement. There are going to be times of disappointment. Hurts and bitterness are often surfaced during this time as well. And it's a opportunity for you to just get stuck and not move forward or even get or move backward. Transitions can lead to a return back because it's so hard and it's not familiar and I don't really like this transition. Let's just go back to what was. Let's just ignore this, because this is not for me. Or transitions can cause a person to just drop out, forsaking friendships, self-medicating, being involved in going deeper into temptations, perhaps. And these are some of the challenges that leaders like you and I go through when we go through a time of transition. And because of this, many leaders actually don't finish well. Many leaders don't finish well. And finishing well is defined as being more in love with Christ at the end of the journey than the beginning. And so I want to really encourage us to hang in there, to not quit, even though it is tough. So why not quit? Why not quit? Well, the Bible offers many encouragements. I like to surface three. 2 Corinthians chapter 4 verse 1 says, "Therefore, since through God's mercy we have this ministry, we do not lose heart." And if I would just paraphrase it, therefore, since God is still at work in your life and using this to shape my life, even in the midst of this confusion and uncertainty, I am not going to quit. 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 9, "But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me." My grace is sufficient for you. And Acts chapter 26, 19 to 20, it says, "So then, King Agrippa, I was not disobedient to the vision from heaven, first to those in Damascus, then to those in Jerusalem and in all Judea, and then to the Gentiles. I preached that they should repent and turn to God, and demonstrate their repentance by their deeds. So, King Agrippa, I was true to this heavenly mandate." Because God is at work shaping my life for a unique and ultimate contribution, I will choose to run the race and finish well. I'd like to encourage us that as we navigate through the heavy downpour and what's ahead doesn't seem clear to us, let us choose to stay with Him. Let us choose to allow Him to do that needed and deeper work within us, so that we can come out stronger, so that we can say that I fought the good fight, I finished the race, and I kept the faith. So in the midst of the pouring rain, I want to encourage that you and I would choose to stay the course, however hard it might be. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Maybe we can take 2 questions that we have. The first one is, does the transition life cycle stages always happen chronologically?
Yeah, I think what you will find is that this model has been done over researchers, 40 years of research at Fuller, and it's been tested with a lot of the journey of many leaders. And we found that this is a general model that most leaders actually would go through. There's a time when you enter, there is a huge moment where you spend under the waterline, surrendering, evaluating your life and aligning yourself to God. And that takes the longest time before you actually emerge out of a time of transition. So I would say, yeah, it's a pattern that is very common to all leaders as they go through a time of transition. I know that there are other transition models out there. I like this model because of its simplicity, and it's been very helpful for me and many other leaders that I've come alongside to help them navigate through their times of transition.
Good. Another question we have is, what does it mean if I identify the same process item repeatedly through different events in my life?
I guess the first question, if I'm having that conversation with you, would be, what do you think? What do you think as you go through similar process items or similar challenges? And I think there are two areas to evaluate. I think the first question would be, is God taking me deeper, or am I having to relearn a certain lesson that I've skipped? Yeah, so I think often we might beat ourselves up because I've not learned my lesson, therefore I'm at this, at this grind again, I'm at this rut. But sometimes perhaps it's we have learned some of it, and God actually wants to take us deeper in deepening our core values or deepening our trust in Him. I think one perspective that is important for us to have is that we are on a lifelong journey. And in this lifelong journey, it is going to be an ongoing process of processing. God will continue to be at work and developing us in our journey. And in some sense, you are never perfect. We want to try to get there. And therefore, God takes us through many moments of digging deeper and discovering the truth.
Yeah.
I think I also want to add another point is that, one of the questions that's often asked is, how long does transition last, right? And transition often lasts from 3 months to even as long as 3 years. And the bigger the transition that you're going through, the bigger the change of what's next, that would often be parallel to the length of time your transition would be. If the change is bigger, therefore more work would probably be needed to be done. So it can last between 3 months to 3 years. There is no secret recipe to how short or how long. If I have 3 things to deal with, means is it 3 months or if it 10? There's no formula to this.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I think it really helps to know that doesn't mean that I'm just there's something wrong with me because I'm just stuck or anything, but that it takes time, and really God works in his time, and just follow. Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks, Joel, for coming on with us and for sharing with us. We'll see you next time.
Okay, bye.
All right, so today Joel shared with us about why transitions are important. That's because God uses them to move a follower forward in their development, consolidate their learnings, process critical past issues, and provide new insights to the leader. The cycle of transition and its four stages: entry, evaluation, alignment, and direction. The purpose of this tool is to help you figure out where you're at so that you can get the most out of where you are and what God is saying about or in your life. Because transitions are difficult periods of time, they can lead to a plateau, a return back, or dropping out. But most importantly, when you encounter transitions, don't lose heart because God is still at work. He uses times like these to shape our lives. He is in it and He has more in store in each transition than we know. Comment below if you have anything to share, you agree with today's teaching, or are simply glad that you are here today. Once again, this was Joel sharing on navigating through transitions. Join us next week with our guest Charles sharing on frontier missions. We go live right here on Facebook every Friday at 1 p.m. Follow us at YWAM Singapore on Facebook or YWAMSG on Instagram for more updates and to read stories. You can rewatch this session on our Facebook page or IGTV. Thank you for tuning in. God bless and be with you as you navigate through your transitions. Have a wonderful weekend.